more effectively as you would from the office. So I've asked Tristram Morgan to be able to come and talk to you about exactly how to do it. He's the founder of the 365 Solutions Group, specializing in the Microsoft stack of technologies. And he's going to talk about how you can safely and securely access all of your data and information from outside the office, how you can take and give calls without having to give away your home number, how to make customer meetings engaging using Zoom and other tools. And if you do need to let people go through this process, how to be able to reclaim usernames, passwords, and other mission critical access points that you don't want to leave open. I think you're going to get a lot of value from this conversation with Tristram. But before we do, let me give you a bit of context. So you're about to sit in on a session from one of our crisis reinvention team, but let me give you some quick context. When COVID started to seriously impact businesses, we mobilized experts from within the Dent community to be able to help business leaders like yourself navigate the difficult decisions across a variety of topics, including how to access finance and grants, to cash management, to human resource law, to marketing and sales strategies, to cool tools and tech that you can use from home, through to high stakes leadership, health, wellness, stress management, not just for yourself, but for your team, and look, a whole lot more. For the full schedule, with more being added every week, visit dent.global/reinvent, and we hope you find it a useful resource. All right, let's do this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tristram Morgan from 365 Solutions Group, beaming to you from my backyard on a Sunday afternoon that's pretty sweltering here in Brisbane. So you'll have to excuse, please, background noises, car backfiring, dogs in the background, birds tweeting, kids running around perhaps, but I've tried to mitigate that. But yeah, so I'm proving, I guess, that I can really work from home in very much the same way as I would work from the office. Location is completely irrelevant. All I need is a device and an internet connection, and I can log in from anywhere on any device and work as if I was in the office. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how you might be able to achieve the same thing, particularly now that we're facing this remote working reality for the foreseeable future. So without further ado, we'll kick it off. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about that's not strictly my area of remit, but we do bump into the sides of it, is the work from home situation regarding policy, compliance, safety, etc. It's in the rush to get back to working from home as opposed to the office. This has often been overlooked, but it's really important that you get your OH&S requirements locked away. So you're still, as an employer, responsible for the safety of your staff in their working environment, even if it's from home. So make sure you conduct checks now. It's a good idea to have a work from home policy as well, in terms of what the expectations are, hours of work, all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to safety, that's really important. So you can just Google work from home safety checklist Australia. There's a link on the screen here that you can go to as well, but that's tricky to capture. But basically just Google that form and you will see something like this, which is the safety checklist that people can fill in themselves whilst you can't conduct the checks physically in their home environments during this period of social isolation. You can certainly get them to do that and send it back to you. And at least that just gives you some level of protection. So that's the first thing out of the way. Now, some of the other things you need to consider about working from home is the comfort factors, such as do people have a suitable chair, desk, working space, etc., to be able to work? And if not, is there something you can do, such as providing them with an extra monitor, a better chair to be sitting in for large chunks of the time, large chunks of the day at one time, to be able to work effectively? That's something just that your safety checklist will certainly help you to determine. How fast and stable is the internet connection that they're using? So as we're all working from home, the average home internet service is getting slammed like all the others in the street. Kids are working from home. Now at school holidays, they're still going to be streaming Netflix and videos and TikToks and God knows what in the effort to amuse themselves while they can't get outside and go and hang with their friends. So yeah, it's really important that you have an internet connection that's workable. If not, then you'll quite often find that tethering your mobile phone is better than using the home internet service. And you can also, if you can find stock of them, get a mobile router with a SIM card in, gives you something like 100 gig for $60. worth looking into if people are having problems with their internet connection. So the other key thing about working from home and using their own device or your device is if your staff are using a company device to access personal data, email accounts, etc., or if they're using a personal device to access company information, you really need some policies around that and some security checks and standards in place. This is always the case, just more so now because we've got more and more people working from home, and there's going to be a mixture of their own devices as well as anything that's provided by the company. So something you need to bear in mind is, have you taken steps to protect your data? If you're mixing that business and personal, then you are a little more vulnerable than you would be if people are using a computer of your provision in your office. So that's something that you need to consider. Is their work backed up? People working from home is great. They're being productive, hopefully. Where is that data being stored? Is it on their personal computer? Is it in the cloud? Is it on your work device, but you can't necessarily get access to it if they're offline? Just really worth thinking through how you can recover that information should you need to, in the event that, God forbid, they fall sick and they can't work. Can you get access to the work they've been performing? Those sorts of things are really worth thinking through. And we can help you if you get stuck on how to go about that. But it's definitely, you can find all sorts of help online to guide you on what you need to do around that security stuff as well. Can they get access to all the information, documents, and applications they need to work productively? Generally speaking, we're not building our systems designed with remote working as a fundamental principle of what will need to happen. But obviously that's all changed. So we need to make sure that we can work productively. So the idea of this presentation is to give you some ideas on how to do that. So typically working from home involves a VPN that's probably built for some employees to simultaneously connect to the office, but not all. We're normally, looking at a percentage of people outside the office at any one time. But sometimes we've got authentication tokens that are required to get access to systems and servers. But usually we're still not giving access to everything as a standard. So not all data and not all systems are being exposed for external access. That's obviously got to change because it could be months before we're returning to working back in the office. So we need to make sure that everything is accessible from the office as much as possible. One standard from working remotely or from home is that using a mobile phone or a home phone for occasional calls is usually fine if it's just now and then. But if it's the standard and you're now working from home full time for the foreseeable future, do you really want to be giving out your mobile or home number for people to call you about work related stuff? It's not so much about the claiming of expenses, which can be dealt with. It's more about revealing your own number and sort of, not being able to stay off the grid, as it were, during personal hours. So that's something to consider as well. Often working from home, good enough is considered to be good enough. In other words, if you can get access to stuff and you can do the essentials, then that's okay. But that's obviously not okay on an ongoing basis. And because remote working is the new normal, we need to make sure that everyone is fully functional. So here is where Office 365 steps in. Now, we're Office 365 specialists. What we do is help people to make the most of their investment in Microsoft products, particularly Office 365, Microsoft 365, and Dynamics 365. There are alternatives out there, and you can certainly find other tools that will help you work remotely. The beauty of Office 365 is it is a complete ecosystem, which is unlike any other. When I talk about Office 365, most people immediately assume I'm looking at Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneDrive, and perhaps Outlook, and if they're very adventurous, SharePoint, and they kind of look at me quizzically like, how can you run projects with Word and Excel? But really what we're talking about is the 30 applications that make up the Office 365 suite, as well as the Compliance Center, as well as the Admin Center. There's so much stuff in here to help you work properly. So let's just have a quick look at the ecosystem. So sorry about the birds in the background. As explained, this is my home office. It's worse inside with kids, so just we'll work with it as best we can. I hope you can still hear me okay. So disparate systems like Google Docs, which includes, Google Hangouts and all the other tools that Google provide, it gets you part of the way there, and it's a fairly good match for Office Desktop in terms of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneDrive, etc. But when you start to look down the list, a lot of people will be using Tableau or ClickView or some other reporting tool, whereas Power BI is out of the box with Office 365 and is a very powerful reporting tool that's built from the Excel platform, so it's quite familiar with a lot of people, even if they've never used it before. It's quite easy to get up and running. Then we have Trello and Monday.com and other similar workforce planning tools where Microsoft Planner is out of the box, does something very similar. Vimeo, an equivalent within Office 365 is Stream, which is kind of like the corporate YouTube channel. It's where you publish information internally for people to access. WhatsApp for Business is a way of people often keeping in touch with their staff that aren't on the corporate network. So in other words, they don't have an email address and they don't have access to all the corporate systems. But Microsoft Kaizala is, again, part of Office 365, does a very similar function, ideal for shift workers and frontline workers who don't need access to the full suite of tools all the time. Zapier, If This Then That, those are tools that allow you to make workflows so that if something happens in one tool, it'll also happen in another tool. So, for example, if I put a blog post published on my website, that will then also appear on my LinkedIn company page, my Facebook page, and my Twitter page. So publish once, see the benefit 4 times. That's a typical example of what a Zap or a Flow would do. So Flow, we're now called Power Automate in Office 365. Part of the suite, it's available, does much the same thing. Box, cloud storage for documents. SharePoint does very much the same thing, but SharePoint is also an awful lot more. So not only is it designed as a very powerful document management system for sharing data internally and externally very securely, but it's also a fully fledged intranet. So it's a great place to publish information that you don't really want to clog up people's email inboxes for, but stuff that's not urgent, but that they should know, events coming up, company announcements, etc. And it's a great place to pull in other applications that people need to access every day. And SharePoint also is a bit of a workflow engine. So it helps you do simple things like automate flows, such as I'm publishing a document to the policies document library within SharePoint. But before it gets to be seen by everybody, it's got to go through a system of approvals. So upload the document, that'll email the people who need to know about it. When they approve the document, it gets published. So all handled through workflows in SharePoint. OneNote is a very cool tool. A lot of people are using something like Evernote. The great thing about OneNote is particularly useful for collaboration in times like this, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail later on. But it's a digital notebook that allows you to do a whole bunch of things, and it's always available to everybody that is on the company domains. So very useful for sharing information pretty much instantly. Microsoft Forms is a tool that allows you to do things like survey people, similar to the way you would with SurveyMonkey, send out a form, collect answers. Jotform is another tool that's kind of similar that people use as a third party. Now, Microsoft Teams is something that we're going to spend a little bit of time focusing on because it's excellent for team collaboration, online meetings, voice and video calls. So it started off as a competitor to Slack. So Slack has been around for a number of years and got great traction, particularly in the IT space as an instant messaging tool. Microsoft Teams has tackled that really head on and does much of the same stuff, but it's also replaced Skype for Business in the full communication tool for online meetings, video conferences, call recording, the whole suite, which we'll come to later. Then we have Sway, which is a very cool presentation tool. Emaze is an equivalent, does some fantastic things. Sway's out of the box, very easy to use, put together presentations very quickly. Again, just comes with the license. OneDrive for Business is a great example of where people don't need Dropbox as an external tool, but they're often using Dropbox with Office 365. They just don't understand that OneDrive for Business does all the same things. And then Calendly is a tool that a lot of people use to publish their calendar to individuals outside the organization who can then book time with them. Microsoft Bookings does the same thing. It's part of Office 365. So the point of this is that you've got all these tools in one place. It's a fully integrated subscription for all of these tools, as opposed to having all these disparate systems. Now, not everyone's going to have the full suite, so the approximation of $180 is not going to apply to most people, but it's certainly going to be likely more than the $17 that you're paying for all of those features and functions through Office 365. Just as importantly, you've only got one login for Office 365, and every login you have is a point of vulnerability when it comes to cybersecurity. it's another chance for someone to capture your details and be able to hack their way into your ecosystem. So having one subscription is a huge advantage. It certainly saves money. It's also more secure. And just to expand on that, if you're in the not-for-profit space, and a lot of our customers are in the not-for-profit space, and it's also a sector that's under immense pressure as all the donations have dropped off a cliff recently. So you can get access to all of these tools for as little as $4.10 per month for a business premium license. You can actually do even better with an E1 license, which is free of charge for not-for-profits. Again, we can give you more details if you're interested in that, but the bottom line is it's great value. It's one single subscription for all of this functionality and allows you to keep going. So there are three pillars really to the Office 365 offering, particularly the three pillars that we focus on. So the first of those is security. Now, cybersecurity is more important than ever now as we're opening up systems to allow people to work remotely. It's always important, but most people have not really rated it as importantly as they should up until recently. So now it's very, very important that you get yourself secure, protect your data whilst making people enabled and empowered to work effectively remotely. So there's a big piece of work that we can help you with in terms of security, but you can do a lot of it yourselves, and we'll come to that again in another slide very shortly. Automation is the second pillar, and that's really about the stuff that I was talking about before, making something happen in one place when you get a trigger from another. So it's a system of triggers and actions, and I've got a bit of a case study to show you about that to demonstrate the power of it in terms of making you work more effectively and efficiently. And integrating separate software platforms is a key part of that, getting systems to talk to one another without human interaction. And the last piece is Power BI for reporting. So what is it that your staff are doing? How much time are they spending online and working each day? How much work are they getting through? How many meetings are they attending? All of this stuff is available in reporting in one way or another through Office 365. And Power BI is really very powerful to be able to pull information from a bunch of different places to give you an holistic view of your business. So we use Power BI, for example, to keep track of our cash flow, our sales pipeline, so we know what's likely to be coming, our work in progress and projects, so we know what work we're doing and what our capacity is. And it just gives us one place to go and look to see how we're performing against a whole bunch of metrics, and enables me to do some sensible planning around sales and resources and general workforce planning. So those are the three core elements of Office 365. We'll just start with cybersecurity. Again, something that you can't take lightly now that you're trying to encourage people to work from, well, you have to enable people to work from elsewhere. So first of all, exposing your data and systems to the outside world is now necessary. So how are you going to mitigate the risks that naturally come with that? If you've got a server sitting in your office and it's not connected to anything other than internal systems, it's obviously more secure, but it's also far less convenient. So you've got to get the balance right between security and ease of access. And that really comes down to an individual question or decision about what is your appetite for risk. Some businesses have personally identifiable information, and that may include details of credit cards, it may include health records. There are all sorts of things that are sensitive information that you really have a legal responsibility to protect. And there are other businesses where they don't really hold any of that sort of information, and they can afford a little bit more of a risk in terms of data being exposed because it's not going to compromise anybody outside their own business. And as long as they've got a way of mitigating that and recovering very quickly, it's not such a loss. So that's going to be an individual position or stance for every business. Now, Office 365 has comprehensive options for securing data, including backups and recovery. So cybersecurity, the analogy we use is a bit like security in your house. If your house has got bars on the windows and an alarm system, and it's all very obvious, you're going to be much less likely to be burgled than the house next door that has none of those visible signs of protection. But even if you're a criminal and you're a little bit more discerning in your targeting, and you say, well, obviously the guys with all the bars on the windows and the security system, they have more to protect. So let's turn that over. Let's focus our attention there. So perhaps you could envisage a burglar breaking in through the ceiling, taking roof tiles off and dropping down through the ceiling into your house. If they find that all the doors are locked internally and everything valuable is secured in a safe or otherwise locked down, it just becomes very much less attractive to focus their energy on in terms of trying to steal from you than the house next door that's got no protection whatsoever. So they're likely to move on. So that's really the analogy. You can't ever make yourselves bulletproof or impenetrable. What you can do is mitigate the risk and have ways of recovering very fast if that should happen. Sorry, noise in the background, just the way it is. This is my home office. So multi-factor authentication. This is a really important step. There's the most fundamental thing. If you take one thing away only from this presentation today, I would love it to be that you are going to protect yourself with multi-factor authentication, which means that when someone manages to compromise your username and password and is logging in as you, they're not going to be able to do anything because they will need to get the code that is sent to your mobile phone. So that's the first step that you can take, and it's fundamental. We've had customers phone me up and say, why am I getting all these codes from Microsoft? It's a real nuisance. I've had 10 of them today. Well, the good news is that you're being protected 10 times over from someone hacking your system. And the thing you need to do next is change your password because it's obviously been compromised. So multi-factor authentication, sometimes called two-factor authentication, is the most important thing you can do from a cybersecurity stance to protect yourselves. But there's also a tool called the Microsoft Secure Score auditing tool, which allows you to run a report from the admin center, from the security and compliance center within Office 365. And that will give you a report on how secure you are on a whole bunch of different metrics. Now, some of those are physical things like, have you switched on this policy? Have you enabled that security feature? And some of them are more like, how many admins do you have registered for your Office 365 tenant? It's a terrible idea to have one admin, because if something happens to that person and nobody else has the login details, you can be stuck. And it's a terrible idea to have everyone being an admin, because that means if anyone is compromised, then they got access to they've got the keys to the kingdom, effectively. So you want to run that secure score to see what your security stance is, and then it will give you ways to improve that. It is a bit tech speak. It's not necessarily easy to interpret what they're talking about in terms of policies and actions that you can take. So we've developed a security audit that allows you to make more sense of that in lay terms. But it's certainly something you should be doing. Is if you're using Office 365, go to run the secure score. Google will tell you how to do that, and you can then interpret the results and make sure you improve your security stance. So now let's talk a little bit about the collaboration tools within Office 365. So Microsoft Teams is a fantastic tool that allows you to not only show content to other people through online meetings by screen sharing. It's also a means by which you can do some basic troubleshooting by allowing someone to show you what the issues are that they're having. But it's for online meetings, video conferencing, obviously. You can record those sessions. You can blur the background. So I could blur the background now so you wouldn't see the fan spinning above my head. But there are all sorts of little features there to get the most out of the online meetings tool, which has now gone through the roof in terms of usage. It's got a perpetual chat feature. So unlike a tool like Zoom, for example, where you can all log in, and Zoom probably has a couple of advantages over Teams from a feature perspective. Excuse me. One of the things that Zoom does is when you finish the meeting, it's over, it's done, the session's finished. Whereas with Teams, if you invite people into the team, then they can actually continue to chat after the meeting has ended by going back to that team session. So that's an extra feature that means it's not just about online meetings. It really is a better collaboration tool. It allows you to share documents through the portal of Teams. It allows you to run projects. There are so many things that Teams can do that are beyond a straight video conferencing tool like Zoom, or a straight instant messaging tool and chat tool like Slack. So Microsoft Teams is something that is becoming more and more important for customers of ours. And there is actually a trial for Microsoft Teams that's available now, and there are details to come later in this presentation about how you can get on that. So Microsoft are offering a free trial for Microsoft Teams and the E1 license. So E being Enterprise, Office 365 Enterprise 1 license, which means that you can trial this free of charge for 6 months. Hopefully by then we'll be back to working as normal. If you wish to drop the tool, you can, but I'm fairly sure that once you start using it thoroughly, you'll really want to keep it, because it is a fantastic way to stay in touch. A simple way that we use it, for example, in my business is it is a perpetual chat tool, so we can all at any time reach out to each other. But we've gone one small step further, and every day we all log into Teams so that we can all see. We join a Teams meeting for the whole day, and we drop in and out of it as we have to go and attend other meetings. But it means at any one time we can just message people to say, hey, could I just borrow you when you've got a spare moment? Just like swiveling your chair around in the office and talking to one of your colleagues. So that just helps us to all see what everyone else is doing, what their status is, as in whether they're free or busy according to the calendar that they're showing. So, for example, if I'm in a meeting, my calendar shows I'm in a meeting, it will show me as unavailable within Teams. So it's a great way for us to stay in touch with each other, feel a little bit more like we can see what everyone else is doing. But yeah, Teams is a brilliant tool, and we have some resources to help you get started with Teams, or to make the most of Teams online meetings, which are available from our website, and we'll come back to that at the end. So I strongly encourage you to get on board with that free trial if you don't already have it. And if you do already have Office 365, start using Teams. I'd be surprised if you haven't been dragged into it by now, by the business encouraging you to do so. But it's there. It's fantastically valuable. Please start using it. So now SharePoint. SharePoint is the tool that I described before, which is very much the document storage system, the document management system. But it is so much more than that, because as an intranet, it's a place for you to go and store information that people can access at any time that they're connected to your system. So company announcements, you can use SharePoint as a front end to all sorts of things. So there are businesses that use it for, they'll install little world clocks and weather widgets, so that if you've got people in different countries or different parts of the country that you're communicating with, you can see what their local experience is, what time it is, what the weather is, etc. Loads of different things you can do from an intranet perspective to make people feel a little more connected. Even more important at a time like this, where we don't physically see any of our colleagues for weeks on end. So SharePoint is something that, if you don't already have it, we strongly recommend that you look at it. The workflows that I already mentioned, there are lots of different ways that you can use workflows and digital forms to get rid of paperwork. When you're running a piece of paper from one desk to another, it's a fairly simple process. But when you're working from home and people won't necessarily have printers set up, they're certainly unlikely to have fax machines. Whether they have scanners and so on is hit and miss. So by having digital forms, you remove all of that issue. So an example would be that you could have an expense claim, or something, let's say an expense claim that you want to make. So you can go into SharePoint and click on the expense claim button, and behind that you just build a little workflow that allows you to enter the information about what the reason for the expense was, when it was incurred, etc. Allocate the cost center if applicable, if it doesn't already pull that from your profile information within Office 365. Upload the invoice and submit for approval. So that's just one example of the many ways in which you can use SharePoint to automate your processes, get rid of paperwork, keep everyone connected. So very, very valuable. And in fact, one of the things that we've done 18 months ago, we released a SharePoint Kickstarter bundle, which incorporates a full document management system and intranet, plus a couple of workflows, which incorporates digital forms too. And that's available out of the box. Again, details are on our website. So you can be up and running within a few days. We can conduct training. We've got user guides. The whole thing is ready to go. So if you haven't touched SharePoint and you don't know what it is, and you're thinking, it sounds like it's complicated, difficult to scope, I don't understand it, it could be expensive, we can have you up and running within a week for a surprisingly small amount of money. Again, details on our website. So OneNote. Now, I mentioned OneNote before as a digital scrapbook. So it's really a place where you can collect information, and that can be, you can freehand draw within the application. You can store videos and photos in the application. So the way that it works, if you imagine you've got a bunch of different tabs, or within those tabs you can then have pages and sections. So really, if you think about the way that we use it, I go to meet with customers and I will take notes from that conversation that we're having within OneNote. So I'll create a section which will be the customer name, and within that I'll create a page which will be the meeting that we're having. And so it's like, this day, these are the people present, these are the things we talked about. Now, the great thing about OneNote is that once I've finished taking my notes, uploading all the details that I want to, videos, photos, and drawing diagrams, etc., if necessary, that's instantly available to everybody else within Office 365 in my environment. So I can literally contact someone after I've left a sales meeting and say to someone in my back-end office, hey guys, I've just finished this meeting. Could you use the notes in OneNote to draft an email to the customer to just say, just confirming that these are the things we've understood about your business. Is there anything we've missed or anything that you need to add as an afterthought? Do you have any questions about the next steps? So as soon as I finish typing, it's available to the next person. So a really powerful way of connecting and collaborating at a time like this. So OneNote, if you're not already using it, get on board. It's huge in education. It's got so many different applications, and again, we could have a 4-hour webinar on that alone, but really very helpful for staying in touch and swapping notes. Now, excuse me, I'll just take a quick sip of water. So the desktop apps that most people associate with Office 365 when they hear the term, being Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and to some degree OneDrive and Outlook. These apps are really powerful in themselves for things like co-authoring in real time. Now, it has been around in G Suite, in Google Docs for a little bit longer, but Microsoft have now had in Word and Excel and PowerPoint the ability to invite someone to work on the document that you're working on. And so you can literally collaborate and communicate. So I might be in one part of the document and you will see a little icon which shows that Tristram is here, and it will show you where I am and what I'm typing. And as I'm typing it, you'll see it appear. As I'm deleting things, you'll see that disappear. And you'll see where you are, and you can have multiple parties. So it's not just 2 people, you can have 3, 4, 5 or more. It doesn't get very practical after that. But let's say that we're working to a deadline, and one of my team is working on the executive summary and I'm fixing up the pricing. We can be doing that at the same time. I see what she's doing, she sees what I'm doing, and we can communicate to each other through the comment section there, just to understand what we're both doing. So that doesn't even need us to be in a team session, even though that's something that we're also doing. And the comment sections in documents. So if you're writing a document under the review tab, there is an option to use comments. So even if you're not doing it in real time because your colleague isn't available and you're wanting to put together a document and get some feedback or other input from them, you can write some comments. When you save the document, you can send a link to that if it's saved in SharePoint or OneDrive, rather than sending the document itself. So it cuts down on the email traffic, cuts down on the attachments that you're sending and the bandwidth that you're using, which when you're working from home is really important. So by using comments and then saving the document, the other person, when they open it later, will see your comments and be able to respond to them and act accordingly to your request. So it's, again, lots of little features within the simple tools of Word and Excel that most of us have been using for decades. There are lots of little things that you can do that will improve the way that you work that you may not be aware of. So if you need any help determining what those features are and how they could help you, then certainly Google will tell you. YouTube is a great source for seeing how these things work in action. And if you still need help, then certainly please reach out to us and we'll do our best to help you. The other thing about the desktop apps, I keep tripping over that, is there are mobile versions for your phone or tablet for all the Office 365 apps. So not just Word and Excel and PowerPoint, but also Power BI, also SharePoint, OneDrive, OneNote. There are so many different apps that you can download from the App Store for your particular device. So Microsoft have had a mantra for some time now of cloud first, mobile first. In other words, get everything off servers and into the cloud. So in other words, Office 365 or Azure, which is their data center, and make it mobile friendly. So this has been what they've been working on for a long time now. And at a time like this, it's become really more relevant than ever. And we're going to see a huge spike in the uptake of a lot of these tools that have been underutilized for a long time. Okay, so whoops, I just clicked a little too fast there. So what I wanted to talk to you about was a customer story of digital transformation. So a lot of people think that Office 365 is just those tools, as I said before, Word and Excel. But now that you've seen there are a lot of other tools, it's not just about the fact that there are lots of different applications within Office 365 that can help you to be more effective. This is a case study about a customer called Volunteer Marine Rescue Brisbane. Now, they had a fairly typical environment where there were lots of different systems and applications that they accessed, none of which really talked to each other. So they would have to go into various systems and access them separately. And what we've done by implementing SharePoint Online in place of their old Access database is we've connected that in a meaningful way to all their other systems, which means that it's more accessible. It means that it's very secure, and it's also a really automated environment. And I'll just show you in a bit more detail what that actually envisages. So Volunteer Marine Rescue, the situation they used to have was that their members would access, or their prospective members would access the website and enter their details to express interest in becoming a member. That information would then be processed by the volunteers internally, who would use a VPN to get to their Access database, and they would enter the details. So from there, they would also enter that same customer information that came from over here in the website, and they would enter that into MyOb to create an entity, or a card as they call it in MyOb, to invoice the customer. So that would basically be sent out, and then the information would be updated into Access once they paid. So from there, we also had a security system which allowed access to the premises. So there's a boat ramp there, as well as a number of hard stands for people to store their boats. And in order to get access, you'd need a security swipe card to get through the boom gate. And that was manually done by the volunteers internally. Excuse me. Then they'd also enter those customer details into MailChimp so they could keep them informed about events. They could send out information as they needed to via MailChimp, but it was, again, a manual process. And lastly, when people were in need of being rescued, so you'd have Volunteer Marine Rescue Brisbane, they'd send a boat out into the bay to go and rescue someone, and then they'd have to VPN in through a laptop to get to the Access database to check the status of the member as to whether they should be towed, whether it should be towed at a charge or whether it should be free of charge, what their status was, whether they were paid up members, etc. So really a lot of different moving parts, and none of these systems talk to each other. So these poor suckers here, the volunteers, would have a lot of work to do to manage all these systems. There was also the need to keep insurance documents up to date. So, for example, if you had a boat and you were bringing it onto the premises, you needed to have that insured, and there was a requirement to see that insurance to make sure that you were meeting compliance standards for Volunteer Marine Rescue, VMR. So it was really about them not being exposed. And that was, again, something that would be manually checked and recorded. So very labor intensive, lots of different systems. So this is how the system has changed through Office 365 being applied to this problem. So first of all, we replaced the Access database that was requiring a VPN to get to it with SharePoint Online. So it's available in the cloud from any device, from any internet connection. And of course, therefore, we implemented multi-factor authentication to make sure that's a secure login and that only the right people get to it. So it's not just the volunteers who have that convenience, but also, just as more importantly, the people operating the rescue boats out in the bay. Then we've also populated the information from the request that was placed to become a member on the website directly into SharePoint. So that's dropped the level of complexity. And then SharePoint actually keeps the records of the insurance records for everyone as well. So at the time they're expressing interest in becoming a member, we then check their insurance details to make sure they're paid up. And there are a series of notifications, like I was talking about before. There are these workflows built within SharePoint. So you can now say, if this expiry date is coming up within 1 month, send out an email to this member to say, you need to renew your insurance, and please send us a copy of your renewed certificate once you have it to ensure that your access is maintained. So very much removes the human element from a lot of these processes. So we've also integrated SharePoint with the security system, and this can all be achieved through, we've written an applet in Excel in one case, but most of these integrations are actually through Power Automate that I mentioned before is the tool to connect all of the various systems. So the security system has nothing to do with Office 365, obviously, nor does the website, nor do all these other tools. But because we're using SharePoint and Power Automate, we can connect to pretty much everything in their environment. So it's really powerful. We've also built a flow to update update MyOb from SharePoint. So when a new member enters their details into a website and that then populates SharePoint, it will also populate MyOb with a card for that person so that they can be invoiced. One of the final stages of this whole process that we're going through is helping them to automate the online payments of the invoices so that there's no human intervention required in sending out the invoices even, or marking them as paid. That can all be chased automatically. So once the invoice has been sent out and it has been paid, MyOb will then populate SharePoint with the information to let them know when the membership expires. So just removes all of that manual work that was required. SharePoint also then populates MailChimp. Again, I think that's the very last piece of the puzzle that we're in the process of building now, to make sure that really there's no real work other than managing the exceptions, as in a customer here might fill in their details in the website, and that should just flow through from there through all these other systems, including the security system. They'll be granted access or denied access based upon their membership status. And all they need to do now is say, for example, why is this record not showing up properly? How come MyOb didn't create the card? And it might be, for example, someone's entered their postcode in the wrong field, or they've duplicated the record because they entered it twice. So it's really just now about managing the exceptions rather than having this onerous workload every year for all members. So Office 365 can help them in a whole bunch of different ways. It's improving service delivery and reducing the costs. Much as they're a volunteer organization, it's still an overhead to get people to perform all that work. It measures client outcomes and service efficiency. So through surveying people, you can get some really good intelligence about how their system is working. There's auditing your existing environment and making recommendations. So again, Office 365 tools can help you to do that. Protecting your sensitive data from cybersecurity breaches, really important. Implementing world-class data security measures. These systems are in place in massive enterprises across the world who rely heavily on these tools to make sure that only the right people are accessing the right information in the right way, and that anything that looks like an anomaly, such as, someone's just logged in from Sydney and yet they logged in only 2 hours ago from Brisbane. Unless they've invented a teleportation device, that's not possible. So let's prevent access. There are all sorts of checks and balances in place to keep you secure. It improves your commercial viability with business intelligence. So it helps you to understand more about your environment and how it's all working. It streamlines cumbersome processes with digital automation, as we've just seen with volunteer marine rescue. It improves information management and accessibility. And here's a real kicker. It can raise the productivity of staff by up to 30%. Oops, I've just clicked too far, sorry. Now, when we talk about that, we're really talking about all the little tasks that it can save you time doing every day. So as a very simple example, and just imagine how many times this can be applied each day. I go to set up a meeting with someone. I want it to be a Teams meeting. So rather than go to Teams, set up the meeting, copy and paste all the details, go to Outlook, create the invitation and paste it in, I don't need to do any of that as I would with a third-party tool. All I do is create the invitation within Outlook and press the button that says Teams meeting. And it just populates all that information to say, This is the link to click on. If you can't click on it or you're not going to be online at the time, here's the phone number to dial in with the conference details. So it's just done, literally one press of the button. And that's an example of the dozens and dozens of tasks that we can automate and remove from any manual work. So when you work out the number of times people do that each day, times the number of people, times the dollars that you're paying that person every hour, it builds up a really compelling ROI very, very fast when you can streamline processes and save all that time every day. It integrates separate applications and tools. And with Power BI, you can develop some world-class data analytics dashboards. Might sound a little bit over the top, but trust me, when you get real visibility of how your business is performing in real time, it makes it so much easier to drive efficiencies and to make things more manageable, more accurate in terms of your decision making. Yeah, so Office 365 is just a complete tool. Now, the reason I'm sort of just a little confused here is because I've obviously hidden a slide accidentally, which was after Volunteer Marine Rescue's case study. What I wanted to also let you know about was that has reduced their workload by roughly 3 hours per member per year. Now, that doesn't sound like an awful lot until you work out they've got 1,000 members. And when you look at 3 hours per member times 1,000, that's 3,000 hours. That's actually 1.5 full-time equivalent positions that they have saved in time that needed to be spent chasing people up for invoices, setting them up in systems, sending out letters of welcome or thank you for renewing your membership. So it's a massive saving. So, let's call it $100,000 as a 1.5 full-time equivalents, which is a fairly conservative estimate. They've also retrieved about $25,000 worth of extra revenue, which wasn't being captured through the sheer manual process, missing bits and pieces here and there. Human error. None of us are robots, none of us are machines, so this does creep in. But so straight away, they've saved $25,000. Now, to give you an idea of the total spend, it's taken us about 3 years to deliver this whole project with them, and it's probably cost about $40,000 to $45,000 to do everything end to end. So there's a massive, massive ROI on the money that we're saving them every year, just in the missed subscriptions, let alone the time that they're now saving in running their processes every year. So anyway, just moving on. Sorry for the little glitch there, but I did put this together earlier today, trying to retrieve some of my Sunday for some family time. So please forgive that. Now, I just wanted to run through very quickly the ways in which Microsoft Office 365 helps your business. So first of all, it's about access anywhere. So I can work from your device in your house with your internet connection just as effectively as I can from mine. I don't store documents on my local drive. I store everything in OneDrive or SharePoint, so it's always there. If I lose my device, it's of real no consequence because I can just go and get another device, boot it up, connect to the internet, log in, and I've got access to everything that I would normally be using. So it's massively valuable in terms of being able to work from any device at any time. Don't store documents locally, get them into the cloud. That's my hot tip for the day. You really can get so much value from just being able to work from anywhere as if you're in the office. Protect your business against online threats. So we've talked a little bit about Secure Score, but multi-factor authentication is the most important thing I can recommend that you do. Switch it on, get yourself protected. So then we've got green and smart IT. That's a nice benefit that you're working everything in the data centers. You're running less power by having your own servers and equipment on site. So it's a really, really nice little benefit that you're actually helping to reduce your environmental footprint. Work smart with automated daily workflows. We've talked a lot about how we've achieved that for Volunteer Marine Rescue. Solve document version control. This is a huge one for a lot of businesses where previously it's a question of a document's been updated, but which is the latest version, where is it stored? That's a particular problem if you've got a storage system that involves multiple places where a document could live. So in our world, for example, we produce work orders and proposals and invoices, project plans, a bunch of different documents for a customer and for a project. We also work with different technologies. So it could be SharePoint, it could be Dynamic CRM, it could be Power Automate, it could be Power BI, it could be a combination of all of those things. And we also have customers, and some of those customers are introduced to us by referral partners. So then we have a logical issue if we were using a traditional folder structure of where do I store that document? Do I store it under customers? Do I store it under SharePoint? Do I store it under proposals, if it's a proposal for a particular customer for SharePoint? What if it's for SharePoint and CRM? Do I store it under both SharePoint and CRM? So you can see very easily how a lot of people have become confused about which is the most up-to-date version of a document if you're storing it in multiple places. By using SharePoint and metadata, instead you can upload a document to almost anywhere that you can imagine, and it still can be findable by tagging it with the metadata to say, okay, what kind of document is it? Well, it's a work order. All right, and which customer is it for? Well, it's for this customer. Was it introduced by a referral partner? If so, you can tag that as well. What technology is it? Well, it's SharePoint, and it's also CRM, and it's also Power Automate. That way I can go back later and look for all the documents that relate to SharePoint and CRM that are proposals, and it will filter that information and give me all the latest results. So version control also means that if I happen to overwrite a document and someone disagrees with my changes and wants the older version, they can go back to that document within SharePoint, click on version control, which is a menu item next to the document, and look at all the history of the various versions and restore it back to the latest one. So they don't have to overwrite it. They can store my older version somewhere else. But version control is really powerful for making sure that you're working on the right document at the right time. Okay, single integrated platform, that we've talked about that at length. Communicate seamlessly. Now, Microsoft Teams, we've covered a lot about that. One of the things that I haven't mentioned about this that I probably should is that Teams can be used for voice calls as well, very easily. Excuse me. So there are some licensing dependencies to make that happen. There is some configuration required, and you do need a voice over IP call plan to make this happen seamlessly. But for those people who are now working from home, which is pretty much all of us, and you're having to use your mobile phone or your home phone for calls, you can now seamlessly use your desktop phone by enabling Teams voice calling, implementing a voice over IP plan so that you can have your call answered on your mobile device through the Teams app. You can have it answered on your desktop through the Teams app. And all you need to do is click on the call. You can make calls, you can take calls, and you just use the audio through your PC, just like I'm doing now to record this session for you. So if you don't want to be using your mobile phone or your home phone to make calls while you're working from home for the foreseeable future, certainly the next month or two, then we can help you to enable Teams calling to make sure that you are not having to use your own device, so your own mobile phone plan or your home phone. So really, really significant enhancement there. Point number 8 is just that it's a pay-as-you-go subscription, so you can cancel at any time. If you need to ramp up right now to get everyone working as well as possible, and you decide to ramp that down later because everyone's back in the office and they don't need all of these tools, I can't envisage that happening. If it did, then you can certainly cancel those licenses. Also, if you order a bunch of licenses now and your team shrinks over time or grows over time, you can expand and collapse that subscription as you need to. And lastly, frequent updates from Microsoft. So you always have the latest version of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneDrive, SharePoint, etc. Because it's in the cloud, because it's managed and monitored by Microsoft, every time they roll out a new feature, you just get it. So you don't have to make sure that you've got upgrades. You don't have conflicts of versions of Excel, for example, where this version is too old to be opened in this, or your version of Excel is too old to open this document, etc. So frequent updates is really important. And lastly, Power BI, which is the really powerful reporting tool, may not be your most burning issue today or tomorrow, but it's likely to be that over the next week or two, you really need to get some more visibility about how well your team are performing, because you need to keep them productive in order to keep in business. The more businesses that we can keep productive and healthy and functioning through this COVID-19 social isolation period, the easier it will be to recover economically once we all get back. So really important stuff. Okay. I won't go through this screen too much other than to just suggest that you can store information on your local device. You can use OneDrive and SharePoint to map folders to your device so you can work offline. So if your internet connection goes down or it's just being hammered by, kids in your house or everyone else in the street, you can still function offline But then when you get back into internet connectivity, it will automatically sync with your cloud version, so that if you should ever lose your device, if that should ever have what I've had happen back in the day, like wine meets keyboard one evening, or you lose it in the back of a cab, or whatever happens, it just gets otherwise destroyed, you've still got a backup version. But you can work offline, so that it's not dependent upon you being constantly connected in order to be functioning. The caveat around there is that some of the Office 365 base licenses, like the E1, you don't get new versions of the desktop apps like Word and Excel. You need to use those versions online. If you've already got older versions, you can continue using them. You just don't get the updates. Okay, I really need to wrap up now. We're coming close to the hour mark. So next steps, if you don't already have it, as in Office 365, get a 6-month free trial from Microsoft right now by going to our website, which is 365solutionsgroup.com.au/Teams-trial. And or you can just Google Microsoft Teams trial. That's another way to go about it. But basically, we can help you through that process. We can guide you through choosing your tenancy name, registering your domain, migrating your emails, etc. If you need to get up and running quickly, we can help you with that in a real hurry. Run the Microsoft Secure Score once you've got it, or if you're already using Office 365. Get protected now as much as you can. Definitely switch on multi-factor authentication, but use all the tools at your disposal to protect your data. It's really important. Cyber activity from a criminal perspective has really stepped up in recent times, which is a terrible thing, but it's a reality we're all facing. Also, start using Microsoft Teams for secure online meetings and to stay connected. So it's not just for meetings. It can keep you and your team all talking to each other throughout the day, every day. Just to make sure that everyone feels like they're still working and pulling in the same direction and working together. And you can download some resources that we've put together, such as how to make the most of Teams meetings, how to let staff go if you need to do that, and remove their license from your Office 365 tenant, but retain all of their emails and data, how best to work remotely. There's a mix of our own resources that we've put together, as well as Microsoft resources that we've got together on, again, 365solutionsgroup.com.au, this time /resources. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can help you. And other than that, you can email us at sales@365sg.com.au, and we'll reply within 24 hours. We are being pretty smashed at the moment, hence me doing this on a Sunday afternoon from the backyard, but we can definitely get back to you pretty quickly. You can also call us on 1300-228-744, and that will come through to any one of us, using Microsoft Teams to distribute those calls to a number of different staff. So very, very cool stuff. Look, thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time. I hope you found something of value in here. If you're not using Office 365, you're probably missing a trick, because whatever other platforms you're using, you don't get the same cohesive single environment that gives you access to all of these tools. And as you can see, it's not even just about having Office 365. It's about pulling all your other systems into one place to give you a proper working environment where everything is managed from a single source. So stay well. As I like to say, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay home. So hopefully we'll get out the other side of this before too long. And in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck in staying productive and staying in business. Thank you very much.
For more expert talks, just visit dent.global/reinvent, because we believe that the decisions that you make now matter more than ever. We started Dent 10 years ago in the middle of the GFC in London, and we shared the key person of influence methodology as a tool to be able to help businesses thrive despite the chaos. Today, it's a best-selling book, and over 3,000 businesses use the methodology like an operating system for driving performance. And we've learned that regardless of economic conditions, that your primary focus as a founder should be showing up as the go-to brand, the key person of influence in your industry. More important than systems or social media, more important than Facebook videos or launching a website, the goal of showing up as the key person of influence in your industry should be the organizing force. It should be the primary objective that helps align all your other decision making. Because as your influence and reach expands, it becomes easier and cheaper to attract clients, team, media, even investors. When times are tough, it's the key people of influence that become even more valuable and even more in demand. And if you've been in business for a while, you're probably a lot closer than you think. So every week that this COVID-19 thing continues, I'm going to be hosting a weekly talk to be able to help business leaders like yourself recalibrate their focus so they can make the most of the times that we're in. If you're interested in jumping on a Zoom and saying hi with me, you can find the link to register for my sessions as well as all of the crisis response team sessions at dent.global/reinvent. If you found this useful, let us know. My name's Glenn Carlson, and please be brave, have fun. Let's go make a dent in the universe.